with the speed of light, a cloud of dust, and a hearty hi-yo silver. The Lone Ranger. This is a story of one of the most mysterious characters to appear in the early days of the West. He was a fabulous individual, a man whose presence brought fear to the lawless and hope to those who wanted to make this frontier land their home. He was known as the Lone Ranger.
Or lease in the morning.
Mike Radich here, and I'm now joined on the phone by actor, producer, horse trainer, and martial artist Scott Shepard. Scott, how are you?
Good. How are you, Mike?
Scott, I'm doing great. I've been a fan of the Lone Ranger all my life. I've been a fan so long, I don't even remember not being a fan. So to get the opportunity to talk to someone who actually played the character, I'm on cloud nine right now.
Well, I wish there was more fans like you. The Lone Ranger needs them.
Scott, this year is the 85th anniversary of the creation of the Lone Ranger. He debuted on radio back in January 1933, so 85 years ago, this character started, and you played the Lone Ranger for 3 years in the early 2000s when Golden Books Family Entertainment owned the Lone Ranger trademark. So before we talk about you playing the Lone Ranger, let's talk about what happened before it happened. Could you give us some background on your background and also how you got into acting?
Well, it happened at a young age. I mean, I was fortunate enough that my stepfather was in the entertainment business, and since I was a little boy, growing up watching TV shows like The Lone Ranger and Rifleman and Big Valley and Bonanza, I always wanted to be that Western actor character, so to speak. And growing up, I did a lot of, I was a big athletic sports person. That's all baseball was I actually wanted to be a professional baseball player. That was my dream as a child. And acting just kept coming back. I do plays and things like that when I was in school. And then at 13, my stepfather got me a commercial and got into it. And then I caught the bug. So I started doing a little bit more with the acting. Still had my dream of being a professional baseball player. And by the time I got to college, I was doing student films. After that, then I just started auditioning for roles. Started at 18 years old, did a lot of heavy auditioning, and then I produced my first student film while I was in college.
Is Shepard your real last name, or is that just a stage name?
That is a derivative. Believe it or not, my last name is Pastori, which is Italian, and Pastori in an English translation is Shepard. So really it's the same name, just a different translation.
They Americanized you.
Absolutely.
Who came up with that?
Actually, I did. It was nobody. I actually did a lot of roles under the name Pastori, and then when started getting into more of the, I guess the Western roles or doing things, just acting overall, people had a hard time pronouncing, believe it or not, the name Pastori. They would say Pastor, and they'd spell it Pastori, and all these other different derivatives. So just sitting around one day, I was talking to a number of other actors that I was friends with in California, and they had all changed their names. I mean, a lot of these actors, even today, it's not their real last names. They make it easier for the public to know, and some keep their original names because it sounds more exotic. But so I was sitting around, and someone said, your last name translates exactly to Shepard. That's what Pastori means in Italian. And I had learned that from another actor who was Italian, and I said, okay. So I looked it up, and lo and behold, Shepard was the exact translation. So I said, really, I'm not changing my name. It's just a different translation. And so I went with Scott Shepard, and people loved it, and it was much easier to say and much easier to use.
It's got a good ring to it. I like it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I read on your IMDb page that one of your mentors in the entertainment business was Chuck Courtney, the actor who played Dan Reed on the Lone Ranger TV series. Is this true?
Yeah,
Wow.
Great man. I had a chance to meet with him numerous times. Got some great advice from him early on, and then he, of course, he suffered a stroke, and his wife informed me they had passed away back then, and it was tough. But Chuck was a very loved guy in the industry, great stunt man. He's actually one of the premier stuntmen in the industry, not as an actor. His forte was stunts, but he happened to get into doing the Lone Ranger as a nephew for the series, and his career sparked, and he's a stunt coordinator and had done numerous movies as a stuntman.
How did you meet him?
Oh, I met Chuck when I was doing the Lone Ranger, when I just had started preparing for it and trying to audition, I guess you use that word, and I sought him out, and we had met at a Hollywood event in Studio City, and we hit it off, and he was a gracious man. He spent a lot of time with me and his wife, and we had a lot of good talks, and kind of gave me some insight, a lot of insight as to Clayton Moore, how he did the role, things that I should do, not to do exactly what he did, make it my own. So he gave me some good advice, and to this day, his picture of him when he was younger and older, appearances all over my office. So he's one of my top people, and there's been many people like him in the industry that I have looked up to. Peter Breck from Big Valley was also a huge mentor. He's like a father to me. He played in that show for many years. So, Peter Breck and Chuck Courtney, Kilo Henderson from 26 Men, that TV series. Kilo is another good key figure in my getting the character down and understanding how to act for a Western, which a lot of actors don't understand, dealing with that time period and understanding, how to play that. So those three guys alone, and then there's others. I mean, I got to meet Monty Hale and Dale Robertson and all the greats who kind of helped me, give me some good tips.
Man, you were really rubbing elbows with some Lone Ranger and TV Western royalty back then. Now, one thing I really wanted to ask you was how you got the part of the Lone Ranger. You're perfect for this role. You have the look. You have a Clayton Moore quality to you. Your face comes to life when you put the mask on, just like Clayton Moore. A lot of people get confused or offended when they hear me say this, but what I mean by your face comes to life is you have very strong features on your face that the mask doesn't cover up. And when you put the mask on, those shine through. Clayton Moore was a good-looking guy, but he looks even better with the mask on. Having an actor whose face comes to life is the most important thing when picking an actor to play this part because he wears a mask all the time. He's not like Batman or Zorro because he doesn't have an alter ego. He's only the Lone Ranger, so if you don't look good in the mask, then you can't play this character. A lot of people get confused when I say this, but I say it because you can be the best looking guy in the world, but if you don't look good in the mask, we have nothing. But you look good in the mask, so you're perfect for the character. So you have that. You have the voice. You're the right age for the part, and you're an excellent rider. You've been around horses your entire life. So everything needed to play this part, you have. Plus, your martial arts background comes in handy because there's a lot of crossover between martial arts and the cowboy way. The cowboy way is all about honor and doing the right thing and respect for yourself, respect for others. What does that sound like? Well, that sounds like martial arts. So there's a lot of crossover there, and that's what the Lone Ranger is all about. So it's very obvious why they picked you to be the Lone Ranger, but did they ever come out and tell you why they picked you? Did you ever ask them why they picked you, or did you just say to yourself, hey, I'm just going to be thankful they picked me and keep my mouth shut before they replace me with someone else? Why do you think they picked you for this part?
Well, I think it was more based on the I had many meetings, and it was based on, I think, personality. I think they wanted somebody who just wasn't trying to do the role as a role, like many actors do, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, a payday is a payday, but they wanted somebody to embody it, much like Clayton did, which is somebody who's going to reach out, like a community outreach, to draw a new clientele of children into it and connect with the nostalgic older people. So they need somebody who could do both. And, at the time I was 32 years old, so I was not a young actor, but I wasn't an old actor, which is about the same age that Clayton had become the Lone Ranger in his 30s. So they wanted somebody who can bridge that gap, and I think that's why I never asked them, but based on my meetings with them, I think that is what they were looking for, and I was thankful that they gave me the opportunity, because it was something that, growing up, being a Lone Ranger, always dreamed of that, and here I was actually getting the opportunity. So, I'm hoping that I did, when I had the chance to do it, gave them what they wanted.
You mentioned you had meetings with the people from Golden Books, but was there ever a formal audition? Did they ever make you put on the costume and do some acting? What did you have to do to get this part?
Well, Golden, what they did was it was many meetings. It was more meetings than it was any type of auditioning. It was more or less us getting to know the person, which was me. They wanted to know who I was and get comfortable with me, talking with me in an office environment. Believe it or not, I was in an office a lot. I never had to put the mask on or act in any way, other than they wanted to see, because Clayton Moore's popularity was based on his personal appearances, not just a TV show. The TV show was, of course, his marquee platform, but he made the Lone Ranger on his personal appearances. That's what he was known for. And whenever he got out to the public, that gave the support for the TV show. And when the show ended, it didn't last that many years. But Clayton Moore embodied the Lone Ranger. And of course, there was a lot of controversy with Dick taking the mask away and all that such. But because of the personal appearances, they wanted someone who was personable. They wanted somebody who was going to reach out. So they wanted me in a comfortable environment. I mean, at many times sitting down having lunch, coffee, and that was the interview. It was almost getting interviewed for a job more than it was for an acting role. So when it came down to be, I was actually on the road, and I think I was in Arkansas or something like that, and I got the phone call. So it was kind of surreal at that point. But they had called me up and said, "Hey, we decided that here you go. You're going to get a fax contract and authorization, everything else that goes along with it." So to me, it was more of a job interview than was auditioning for a role.
Clayton Moore was the Lone Ranger. Then he was fired and replaced by John Hart. Hart didn't work out, and Clayton got his mask back. Then, years later, the Rather Corporation took the mask away from him, and Clinton Spilsbury was the Lone Ranger in The Legend of the Lone Ranger. That movie failed, and then Clayton got his mask back and was the Lone Ranger until he died. So you truly were taking on the impossible task of trying to replace Clayton Moore, because all the actors before you had failed in trying to do the same thing. Now, when you got hired to play the Lone Ranger, it was probably the worst time possible for you to be taking over the role, because Clayton Moore had just passed away shortly before you put on the mask, so lots of people were thinking about him, and this was right in the middle of the only Clayton Moore is the Lone Ranger era, which we're still living in and most likely will always be living in. Not that I'm complaining or anything, because I'm a huge fan of Clayton Moore. I'm just laying out the facts. But anyways, with all that in mind, did you feel any pressure taking over the role?
I did. It was a lot to live up to. I did get, some people, I mean, majority of the fans were happy that I was continuing on this legacy or this calling or representing a role. They knew Clayton, of course, was up there in age. He couldn't do that anymore. They needed somebody to come in. So I got welcomed by majority of the people, but there were a few who were like, well, if you're not Clayton Moore, you're not the Lone Ranger. And I got a chance to meet John Hart. Now, John Hart played the Lone Ranger for one season when there was a contract dispute with Clayton. And John Hart had done other series like Hawkeye and so forth. And John said to me, and he was another good person to talk to, another mentor, having played the Lone Ranger on television. John Hart said, hey, the difference between Clayton Moore and me and John Hart, was that Clayton believed he was a Lone Ranger. John Hart said this was a job. So that was the difference. And when John Hart told me that, I got it. You know what I mean? I got it. John Hart said, hey, it was enjoyable. The Lone Ranger to me was a job, though I still did the best to represent it. I wasn't Clayton Moore because I didn't believe I was the Lone Ranger. And so I had to get in that frame of mind and believe I was the Lone Ranger to pull off that same magnetism, I guess, if you were to use that. So there was a lot of pressure. And it was pressuring all the way to the end. It was really, it was exhausting, to tell you the truth, because you always had to create something for yourself, create a new brand of Lone Ranger, but at the same time carry on what Clayton was doing to make it transparent. And it was exhausting at times. It really was.
How often did you hear the things about Clayton Moore? Did people just come right up to you and say that? Like, hey, you're not Clayton Moore, you're not the Lone Ranger. Did that ever happen to you?
Yeah. I got that. A few people. It was mostly one or two here and there, the appearances, the older folks, but it really wasn't in a disrespectful way. We had great conversations. Nobody was mean about it. I even spoke to Clayton Moore. I mean, I had a chance to meet with him prior, and talking to him. I spoke to his daughter, after he had passed. But I talked to Clayton, and he's very possessive about the character. He's always believed he was a Lone Ranger to the end, which he was. It was very hard for him to see anybody else do it anyhow. I think in Clayton's mind, when they did the one in '81 with Clinton Spilsbury, which we all know was a very bad rendition of the Lone Ranger, Clayton felt he should have played the Lone Ranger in '81 when Clinton Spilsbury did it. They didn't ask him back to do that. He was much older at the time, but they wanted someone younger, and they went with Clinton Spilsbury, who, that whole fiasco. And Michael Horse, who played Tonto, I did a lot with Michael from that movie when he did Legend of the Lone Ranger. And Michael Horse gave me a lot of insight too, and what it was like dealing with Clinton Spilsbury as an actor for the Lone Ranger, what Michael believed and what it was the Lone Ranger needed to be, and what he did for that movie representing Tonto. And so for me, I did a lot of homework. Put it that way, a lot of homework.
When you took over the part of the Lone Ranger, Golden Books Family Entertainment gave you a list of guidelines to abide by. In that list of guidelines, what were some things written?
Well, obviously you had to be on your best behavior, which normally I always am anyhow, but they didn't want you going out and having a beer. Let's say even after you're done, going back into, like when I do an appearance, they put me up at a hotel or I'm at an event, and I come out of my character or my outfit. Now I'm hanging out with other actors. Peter Brown, for instance, from Lawman and other actors that I hung out with. I had to not be sipping that beer. I never smoked cigarettes, so they didn't want me smoking cigarettes or, using profanity. You had to stay with the profanity, even because they don't know who might be around you. They didn't want somebody to say, "Oh, I know what the guy is like who's playing the Lone Ranger." He really is someone who drinks and smokes and swears and all these other things. So they wanted somebody who was going to stay in character somewhat when they were not in character, because that's what Clayton did. He represented it inside the outfit and outside the outfit. And so it was a lot of pressure to do that same thing, even though that's why I said the interview process, they wanted to get to know me. They wanted to make sure I wasn't that type of person that when I got out of the role that I was totally somebody different. So they wanted somebody who kept that consistency. And even though I did, I then put more pressure on myself to even be more consistent, which drives some of the people who worked around me crazy, because I would tell them not to drink, not to smoke, because I tell them it was a reflection on me, and it really wasn't. They were their own people, but there was a lot of pressure on those people that worked with me. It was tough. I was always policing them on what to do and what not to do.
During your time as the Lone Ranger, what exactly did you do? I've read online a few different things. I've read online that you did public appearances, interviews, both on radio and TV to promote the character. I've heard that you did autograph signings, rode in parades, those kinds of things. What exactly did you do as the Lone Ranger?
Well, we did a lot of, like you said, the appearances were a major thing, because they were trying to ramp up to do a new movie. That was the crutch of it, to get it going, the steam going again, because the Lone Ranger had been dormant all these years. Clayton Stillsbury is the last film that they have done, or any type of TV show that was done. There was a cartoon that went on for a little while, but they needed to get the steam up again, get a whole new fan base going, get the buzz going, because the Lone Ranger had been forgotten. Unlike other characters that kept up, their characters, Zorro had been kept up, and Batman and Superman and all these other superheroes, which was a Lone Ranger really is. He's a superhero character. So nothing was kept up. It was kind of put on a back burner. So they wanted to develop that steam, a lot of personal appearances. Then I started doing print ads, some commercial ads. I did something with Sprint. We did a Marshall Corporation. So they had all these different things that I was doing print ads for, and then I did a couple of commercials as well, and to get the buzz going out there, and then a lot of interviews, radio, TV, to build up that steam. And eventually we did a photo shoot for prepping for a movie, what it would look like on the set. They had a couple of sets done. We did that, and then, of course, that's when Golden Books went filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and had to sell off their entire catalog, which include Lassie and Lulu and Lone Ranger, all these characters. So they had to sell off all their trademarks because they no longer could stay afloat. The Lone Ranger would have been their last hope, but it didn't come soon enough.
How many public appearances did you do during your time as the Lone Ranger?
I can't count. I officially did it for 2 years. I probably did about 200 appearances a year all over the country.
When Clayton Moore did his public appearances as the Lone Ranger, he signed autographs, shook hands, took pictures, and talked to the fans. But he also did a little performance. He would spin his guns, do a Q&A, and tell stories that were related to the Lone Ranger. Stories like how he found silver in Wild Horse Valley, or how he and Tonto became friends. Stories like that. Now, when you did your public appearances, did you do something similar as the Lone Ranger?
No, I did, yeah. It was I did everything on horseback. I had a few silvers. Of course, like the Lone Ranger, there's more than one silver. And I had a few, too. I had one on the West Coast, one on the East Coast. And then the horse would be, of course, had a rear. There was a different horse for different types of functions. Some silvers wouldn't do well in big crowds like a parade, so I had a silver for that. I had a silver that did well in a rodeo arena, so they could rear up and it can do his galloping, and I don't have to worry about too much because I have to be able to handle my guns on horseback, and so I did a lot of that. With different silvers. I probably had about 4 or 5 different ones that I rode, and they had to look almost exactly alike, which was tough because some of them had a little bit of gray to them, or a little bit of black spots in them, so they had to hide that a little bit. Baby powder usually does that. You get the horse to look a little bit more white. So once they have silver in their mind, they don't see the differences, especially in personal appearances, unless somebody followed me around and went to every appearance, they wouldn't know that the horses were different.
Who came up with the design for the costume you wore? Because I'm seeing a few different versions of the Lone Ranger within your version of the costume. I'm seeing a little bit of the traditional Clayton Moore costume from the TV show mixed with the Lee Powell, Robert Livingston version of the costume they used in the two Lone Ranger Republic serials. So who came up with the design for the costume you wore?
That was a coordinated effort between me and Golden. We had thought of, I originally had worn the traditional Clayton outfit. That was my first outfit that I wore. I still own that, one version of it. I was able to keep one of those original ones. And they thought they wanted to get away from that. They didn't want people to see me as Clayton Moore. And they also thought that outfit was not traditional enough for the West. It was too much of a tight-fitting Superman type outfit. They wanted something more Western and something looked a little bit more authentic in a way. So they went with so I suggested to them, hey, all the studying I've done, I've looked at the Republic serials of Robert Livingston, and I like the bib shirt. So they said, okay, let's look at bib shirts. And then we went with the black pants because it was more, no one wore those light blue pants in the West. That wasn't a normal color. So black or the browns or the blue jeans, whatever it may be. So we went more with the black pants and the gray bib. And then we kept the traditional scarf, or the red scarf that Clayton wore, and the mask that he wore, and the white hat. So, in fact, that hat was designed exactly the way that Clayton had. And that was put together, so you're right, it's a combination of a few of the different outfits that evolved. But I originally wore the Clayton one. That was kind of cool, but I also saw what they were saying. I didn't want to be Clayton Moore because then people would really look at it as a knockoff. They wanted something that was the new version. Almost like Batman. Batman has gone through many changes of costumes from Adam West to Michael Keaton, and of course to Ben Affleck now. So you have all these different versions, and the same for Superman. Everybody has to morph somehow, and that's kind of what they wanted the Lone Ranger.
You said it beautifully right there. Clayton Moore's version of the costume is more like Adam West's, his version when he was Batman, and your version of the costume is like Michael Keaton when he took over the role. Exactly.
It's just, there's not one better than the other. It's just for the time period. It's to show the character, just a different version of it. I love George Reeves as Superman. I thought his costume was great. But when Christopher Reeves did it, they changed it a little bit. And, of course, when it goes to Brandon Routh, he did it, and then, of course, Henry Cavill. So everybody wants to put their own spin, and each actor actually puts their input in. They do get input from the actors when they play the roles, and they ask them, what would you want to see in this, or how does it fit your body? And that's kind of how they want to do it. So that's how we kind of morphed all those things. I think the most consistent outfit is probably Zorro. Zorro has been Zorro, a little changes here and there, but overall it's the black outfit with the cape and the mask and the hat and the sword. And, pretty much Zorro is Zorro. So he was one of the few characters that pretty much stays consistent from the time he was created to now.
Yeah, Clayton Moore's outfit, that worked great for the 50s, but your version works great for the early 2000s. So I definitely can see why you guys went in that direction. Now, how long did you wear the Clayton Moore outfit before switching over to your version?
Probably only a couple of months. I think it was a combination of us coming together, Golden and I, saying this doesn't feel right. We did some appearances and some photo shoots. It looked great. I got to rear the horse with that outfit on, much like Clayton does with the Lone Ranger rock and all that. But I did not feel it. I did not own it. I didn't feel like I owned it. I feel like I was taking somebody else's, I guess, idea, a costume, or whatever it was. It just didn't feel, and they saw the same thing. So we revisited, and then the new outfit had come up. I wore it. They approved it and said, let's go with it. And people liked it. In fact, there was very little talk of anybody as to, that's not what the Lone Ranger looks like. They actually were like, wow, that's the Lone Ranger. They kind of accepted it right away. I thought there was going to be some, if anything, there was going to be some backlash on that, but people really gravitated to it. They really liked it.
Do you have both versions of the costume you wore? Because earlier you said that you still have the Clayton Moore style costume. Did you keep the updated version also?
I have both versions. I still have both versions. I was able to keep two of them. Of course, there were many costumes that I had. Believe it or not, there was only one mask made, and I have that. They had a form fit that, of course, to my face, and they had to get it made in fabrication. And then the mask was made. What people don't realize, excuse me, is the mask. You can't see anything with those masks. I don't care. If a superhero to exist in real life, they probably wouldn't wear a mask. Your peripheral is gone, so you have to turn your head a lot. And so they had to really make that mask, because my complaint was I couldn't see my peripheral. And when you're riding a horse, you need that peripheral. And so they did their best to really keep the mask the same, but also give me as much peripheral as I could, because I'm doing the gun handling too. Spinning the guns like Clayton did, and doing all the fancy gun handling and tricks, and to have to turn my head all the time was just too busy. So I needed to be able to use my peripheral and look like it's natural to me, because I turn my head a lot while I'm doing a lot of these tricks. It looks like it's my first time, so I'm trying to maintain a little bit of, I guess, slickness, if you would say, or look real comfortable. So that mask it really was cumbersome, but they did the best they could, and I worked it the best I could. I got used to it over time.
It seems like the Durango Kid had the most practical mask. If a character like that actually existed, that bandana mask, that would probably be the way to go. But a few of the actors who have played the Lone Ranger, they say their number one complaint while wearing the mask is looking down. Did you have any problems looking down?
Yes, you could not look down. You had to. When I had kids walk up, I wouldn't know, and I had handlers around me. A lot of times I had one or two handlers, and they would tell me, hey, I want you to meet Johnny, or I want you to meet Susie. And I'd look down and go, oh, because you're standing like 6 foot high, and then you have children who are small. It's very hard to look down, and when you're walking, you have to look down a lot because you don't want to trip, going down stairs. So really, like you said, the Durango Kid had the best mask of all. So for these actors and characters that have to wear full masks, whether it be just across the eyes or a full head mask, they really are impossible to wear. It does make it cumbersome.
Does February 7th, 2001 mean anything to you?
Yeah, that was I got the proclamation from Las Vegas Mayor Oscar Goodman. He declared it the Lone Ranger Day in Las Vegas. So that was a big honor, and I really appreciate that.
On that day, what went on?
Well, they had me up there with the city council and gave me a proclamation and a nice award, and Oscar Goodman had given a speech. Of course, Oscar knows the Lone Ranger, grew up with it, and being an actor himself, having done some movies, and he always said to me, don't forget about me, I have my SAG card when you do the Lone Ranger movie. I remember making a comment for the city council that it'd be great if we need a lawyer in the Lone Ranger movie, he'd be the guy. So he could play the mayor. So Oscar Goodman was great, and to this day, every time I still run into him time and time, and he remembers. So it was a surprise to me. I did not know it was going to happen until it happened. I don't expect accolades or keys to cities, and I've gotten a couple of them, but to me, it's not what it's about. And I just enjoyed going out there, and any award I got or something like that was very, very appreciated. But I think the character deserves the award, not me. It's the character that gets the award.
Very little is known about Golden Books Family Entertainment. A, because they went out of business a really long time ago, and B, because they had a very short run as the owner of the Lone Ranger trademark. So what were they like, and what was it like working for them?
You know what? I enjoyed them. They really, I think they had a lot on their plate. I think they had a lot, they owned a lot of trademark. Like I said, they had Lassie, they had Lulu, they had characters like that. They had some lesser known trademarks, and they would tell you they're a trademark owner, not the owner of the character. They own the trademark to that character. And because they don't believe that they created it. So when they said they had the trademark to it, it made me feel that that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to lay claim to it, because some people who take over a trademark will say this is our character. And Golden Books, their thing was, it's not our character. We own a trademark to it, but we didn't create this. We're just trying to carry it on. And I think that's why we got along so well, is because I believe the same thing. But in Golden Books, they just had so many trademarks. It was very hard to focus on one. Their big thing was books, getting these characters out the books. And even back then, before the internet and so forth, books weren't being read as much, and things are starting to gravitate to other types of venues. I mean, television and movies were much bigger. They didn't have the budget for that. So for them, it was more or less pumping it out there in print, appearances, things like that to generated movement, to make a movie, or get a studio to buy off on licensing the trademark for a movie. And that's what their business was, licensing the trademark. They weren't in the business of entertainment, even though that's what their name was. They were more like a trademark warehouse. And but I believe that they had cut down the number of trademarks they had and put more money into some of their characters. They may have owned it longer to this day, but it's a tough business. I really felt for them when they told me that they had to close up shop, and they really treated me like family. I mean, their name lived up to it. The Golden Books Family Entertainment, and they did treat everybody like a family. I mean, I had constant contact with them. I mean, all the time. They were, very involved, and we had a lot of great laughs. And sometimes being nice in this business is it can hurt you in the end.
Was Mickey Free the only Tonto you worked with?
Yes, Mickey came at the end. Mickey had, he's been a friend of mine. I approached Golden Books and said, hey, listen, we need to have Tonto. Lone Ranger, I didn't like the fact that it was just a Lone Ranger and Tonto. I believe there was a partnership, and that's what Michael Horse had talked to me about. When him and I had talked, and Michael wanted it to be a partnership, and that's what his dream was, and that's what he saw with Jay Silverheels. They wanted that partnership, but of course back then in the 50s, it was, being a Native American and Jay Silverheels, he was the first Native American to star in his own series, but it was still the Lone Ranger, and my thing was it's the Lone Ranger and Tonto. It's not just the Lone Ranger. That's how Michael felt, and that's how Mickey Free felt when I met with Mickey, and he's a great guy. I mean, we had so many laughs, Mickey and I, and he believed in the character Tonto. So when he started putting together his outfit, it was the traditional Native American, he was his Cherokee heritage, and he really brought it out. And Mickey and I did a couple of appearances together, and unfortunately it came at the end, so he didn't get a whole lot out of it. But we both had this idea that when this goes, at the time when we thought the movie was impending, that we were going to make this a partnership. This wasn't going to be a one-sided marketing deal. And, Clayton and Jay got along great, but unfortunately Hollywood and the marketing back then, they leaned more on Clayton, and Tonto was a sidekick, and we didn't want that. Mickey and I were not about being sidekicks. It's about we're a partnership, we're a duo. One couldn't survive without the other in the West in fighting the bad guys or whatever it may be. We had to solve the crimes together, and that's how we looked at it. And, we had that connection. Mickey and I had a great connection.
And between the two of you, he was the bigger name.
Yes, he was. I mean, Mickey was more known for his musical talent.
Mm-hmm.
He was, right. Of course, he was with the group Shalimar, which is a big group back in the 80s.
Absolutely.
He was good friends with Gene Simmons. Gene Simmons from Kiss was his manager. Mickey had written soundtracks for Footloose and other things. I mean, he won Grammy Awards. So Mickey was a musical talented person, but acting was his dream, and to bring forth the real Native American heritage, through the television and movie medium. So, which is very big for him. His heritage is very big, and I'm very big on that as well. So that was, he was, his name, Mickey Free, in the musical world was bigger, but no one knew him in the acting world. So it was kind of like a new horizon for him that he wanted to get into. So it was great. We were bringing out. No one knew him from something else where they can say, just like me, oh, that's the guy who played whatever. Mm-hmm. So there was no something like that where you had other actors who go into something and go, oh, that's the actor from this, this movie or this TV show or that character. There was no predisposition on it. And I think that's what they wanted with Golden Books, was a whole new era is what they wanted. That's what I wanted to create from the start.
I've only seen one picture of you and Mickey together as the Lone Ranger and Tonto, and you guys look amazing together. I love the Lone Ranger and Tonto. I love these characters. I love these characters for the exact same reason everyone else likes them, the values, the lessons, all that good stuff. But why I really love them so much, and why I think they're the greatest characters ever created, is because of how they look. They're a good image. They look great together. A masked cowboy who rides a big white horse and an Indian who rides a paint. They look great together. They look so great when they appear out of nowhere, riding the planes. They show up. They help people. They look great together. And you and Mickey, when I see you two guys together, I get that same feeling. It's perfect casting. You have the right look for the Lone Ranger. He has the right look for Tonto. You guys are a perfect match for each other. The height is good. The look is good, and also the age difference. Tonto is supposed to be, in my opinion, Tonto is supposed to be slightly older than the Lone Ranger, and Mickey Free is slightly older than you, Scott, so you guys are great together. I've always said that these characters are great because men want to be them, and women want to be with them, and you guys fit that bill. You guys are the perfect image. I know for a fact that had you guys made a movie together, you would have been great. And the movie would have killed it. You would have knocked it out of the park. It's something that we would still be talking about to this day. I know that for a fact because this movie didn't even get made, and here we are still talking about it 15 plus years later.
Yeah, Mickey and I had such high hopes for it. I mean, we really spent a lot of time together on our personal time. We had dinners together. We hung out together. Mickey is the funniest guy in the world. He had me in stitches. I mean, Mickey is a funny guy. He really, really could tell a good story. The way he tells stories, I could listen to him for hours. And we had some great get-togethers. We really had a good time. And for us, that chemistry was there, not just in front of a camera, but off. And, we had a blast, a real good blast. And I think Mickey... for us, when we teamed up, it was a look. I think Golden wanted to see how we looked. I mean, we were the same height. We were the same build. I mean, they wanted everything to be equal, and we wanted that same thing. We didn't want one to be bigger than the other or one to look more inferior to the other. We wanted it to be an equal platform, that if at any one time Tonto could be the head guy and the Lone Ranger could be the sidekick. Mm-hmm. That's the whole purpose, was that either one could be the sidekick. And either one was the sidekick. At the same time, either one was the hero. And that's kind of how we both played it. We wanted Tonto to look superior as much as the Lone Ranger looked superior, so that there was that one could be there without the other, but one couldn't exist without the other. That's kind of what we were going for.
When did talk of making a movie start? Was that day one stuff, or did that start after you had been playing the Lone Ranger for a little while and the public was responding to you positively? When did talk of making a movie start?
Well, you hit it on the head. It came pretty much when we got the response. Of course, they want to test the water. Let's see how it gets traction and if it grows some legs. And that's what they wanted to see is, once I started getting out there, they started saying, this is people are starting to gravitate. These new kids are liking it. And then when Mickey Free came along, we really hit home, and then we really started getting some traction. Unfortunately, the traction wasn't there soon enough, and Golden Books was already on the last leg at that point. I guess in a way it was like a Hail Mary pass, to try and get the Lone Ranger to get enough traction quick enough, but it didn't happen. And of course, Hollywood movies take time. Sometimes they're what they call development hell, and some movie could take up to 10 years to make. I mean, Clint Eastwood did The Unforgiven. That took 10 years to make, before they could actually make it, and that was Clint Eastwood. So you can imagine, some of these movies sit on a shelf for so long. There was a movie on Netflix, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, that the Coen brothers did, and that movie took 15 years to make. That had James Franco in it, and Tim Blake Nelson, and all these other people. So, even with big stars, these movies take 10, 15 years sometimes. They don't
How far into development did this project get before it was shut down?
Only in the pre-production area, which means exploratory, developing, not even a partial script. More of a treatment was done, what the film would look like, what the character would look like. An actual script was about, they were looking at people to write the script at the time, and that's as far as it went. They had the treatment done, which was, okay, this is what the story looks like. This is how it's going to evolve. They didn't want to follow the same old, here's how the Lone Ranger started, here's how he met Tonto, and that's what they did with the movie with the latest one that came out with Johnny Depp. They went back to the beginning again, and people go, you don't need to go to the beginning every time, and I think some people just want to see, okay, where's it at? You always go back to a movie where the beginning is. That's what Batman and Zorro did so well. Is they started with the time as Zorro is popular, or Batman is its popular state, and then once in a while they flash back to here's how it started, or they do a prequel, much like Star Wars does. They do a prequel, and I think that's what we wanted to go for, which was the Lone Ranger and Tonto were already established. If we had to do flashbacks and we had to do a prequel or how it all started, that could be done too. But you don't need to start with the origin. It just kills too much of the time. Let's just get down to the meat and potatoes, and that's kind of what we were looking forward to.
And that's the Lone Ranger. He has a great origin story, but his best stories are one-off adventures. Stories when he appears out of nowhere, helps the good people, captures the bad people, and then vanishes as quickly and mysteriously as he showed up. That's when the Lone Ranger is at his best, because he's a man of mystery. The less we know about him, the better. We do an origin story, we find out all this background on him, it kind of hurts the character. Because when the character started 85 years ago on radio, he didn't have an origin, and no one cared. No one cared. It was years before he had an origin story. The first time the ambush was ever put into the Lone Ranger mythology was the first Lone Ranger cliffhanger serial in 1938. Before that, there was never even a mention of how he came to be, how he got to be the Lone Ranger, how any of this started. So I like that you guys weren't going to do an origin story. Now, I know you said there wasn't a script written, but that treatment, what was in that treatment? Do you remember what was written?
Pretty much it was I think at that point they'd started off in a town, and we had done some shots in that town. It was more of a mining town. And the Lone Ranger and Tonto were a happenstance happened to come upon situation. That's how it would start off. It would automatic, good guys win type of scenario, which is, it was automatic action. It was to get people right into it, to establish that this is the heroes of the film and this is who they are and this is their abilities, and then go into a little bit more of a story. So when the treatment was done, it was more or less, as soon as that opening credit happened, they were already into the action. It was already going to be a scenario where Lone Ranger and Tonto saved the day. So there wasn't have to be a build-up to saving the day, because there were many days to be saved throughout the movie. But they wanted to start it off with, boom, established. This is who they are. This is what they're about, and they're here to take care of business. And that was what the treatment was about, was getting the Lone Ranger and Tonto right in your face from the beginning, not have to worry about a lag time or a build-up, get people sucked into it right away. This way they wanted those characters. I want to see more of this. Boom, I saw them. Now I want to see them throughout the movie, doing what they do best. That's kind of how Batman did it. That's why when you see these superhero movies, when they get right into it from the start, that's when people get sucked in, because they want to see more. Mm-hmm. You're given that adrenaline boost from the beginning, and that's kind of what we wanted to do with Lone Ranger.
Interesting. So you were doing the Lone Ranger version of Michael Keaton Batman, where he takes out those two thugs on rooftop.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly it. Just what they did. That the whole Tim Burton thing, which is get it going from the beginning. Let's not wait. Let's just get right into it. Why are we gonna wait around? If you equate to having dinner, give me the main course. I don't need the appetizer right. Mm-hmm. Let's have the main course. Let's get and then since everybody wants to know what the main course is when they go out to dinner. It's nice to have a salad, nice to have something. But what's the main course? That's what I'm looking forward to. That's what we wanted to give people.
when Golden Books went bankrupt, was there any chance you guys could have continued on with this project? Because there's one thing about this situation that doesn't make any sense to me. Because here you guys are, right in the middle of pre-production when Golden Books goes out of business, so that causes the project to get shut down. But then less than a year later, the character is under new ownership, and Chad Michael Murray is playing the Lone Ranger on the WB television network. So how did that happen? Could you explain that to me? How does that project get greenlit basically overnight?
It's Hollywood for you. This is what they did. You know, at the time they wanted to go the Smallville route.
Right.
And, you know, everybody was into that whole young thing, you know, the teenage versions of all these superheroes. So, of course, Smallville had their thing. And so they wanted to do the same with the Lone Ranger and Tano with Chad Michael Murray, the younger version. They felt that myself and Mickey were too much of the mature version. They wanted to go back to, okay, let's capture the lightning in the bottle with Smallville and see what we can do with the Chad Michael Murray deal. And nothing against him as an actor. He's a fine actor. But what happened was people just didn't connect because you can't create a Smallville when a character has been dormant for so long. Where Superman worked with Smallville is that Superman had some consistency throughout the years in movies and other renditions, that when they came out with Smallville, people still had a connection to Superman. When you do Lone Ranger and you come out with a teen version of it, and there's no consistency or no renditions over the years, the last thing they did was Clinton Spilsbury, and it wasn't even that good. Now you're starting off with fresh people that have no connection. These young people are like, well, I see these young Lone Ranger, but who is that? You know, they don't understand the young version of what. They had a big question mark. So, of course, Hollywood, they're like, we want to go with the younger thing. And like Clayton, I got a cease and desist letter. I had the same exact thing. You cannot wear the mask anymore. And I was like, wow, this is like history repeating itself. And I kind of felt honored. I kind of felt like now I'm in Clayton Moore's club, and it felt, in a way, I was a little disappointed, but at the same time, I'm like, well, this is how he went through it, and I honored it. Of course, I wasn't fighting it like Clayton because it wasn't mine. I didn't own it. It's not my trademark. I believed in the character, but I'm not going to try and fight this in any way. I just gave them what they wanted and stopped wearing the mask right then and there. As soon as I got that cease and desist, the last time I wore the mask. Golden Books had filled them in on what they're doing, and they said, nope, this is the kind of direction they wanted to go. They had no interest. I already had been in my at 34 at the time, so I had no way was I going to fit anything they had in mind. And what they did, that TV movie, was just it was their way of teasing it. They did nothing to prep. And, they just decided to spray and pray. Let's just throw it against the wall, see if it sticks. And that was the problem, because they took something that they had no familiarity with, threw it against the wall, and it fell on the floor. And that's the problem. And Golden Books went the route of, let's not just throw it against the wall, let's build this and create the buzz. And if you have me creating the buzz for 2 years as the mature adult version of the Lone Ranger, it's not going to translate to a young one. It makes it confusing. So I got a lot of calls, a lot of people saying, what's going on here? What happened to the Lone Ranger? They were doing a mature thing, now they're back to the young thing. Who's this young guy? He was never out there. I mean, I can see if they put him on tour with me, that'd be different. The older, the younger, the Chad Michael out there, but it never happened. So when they threw it against the wall, it just did not gain any traction. It was a total flop. And again, nothing to do with the actors. They're fine actors, but that's what happens in Hollywood. But just take something and throw it against the wall. And sometimes it works. Sometimes they do that and it works. And again, when there's nothing going on with a certain character for so long, you can't expect it to gain traction just because you throw it up there.
Was it tough for you to watch that movie? Because here you are, you're so close to playing the Lone Ranger in a major motion picture. You've been doing the work for the past 2 years. The public, it's all built up. They're waiting for you, and then it's taken away from you, and it's given to someone else, and the product that they put out there isn't the best product that could possibly be put together. How did it make you feel watching that? Was it tough?
It was tough. I mean, it was tough because, you put the work in, but I felt good because it wasn't I wasn't being replaced with someone like me. Meaning it wasn't the mature Lone Ranger. It wasn't somebody else, another actor my age during that time period when the Lone Ranger was at his best. They went a whole different route with a younger actor and a younger story and an origins type thing. And I was like, okay, that's fine. So I didn't feel as replaced. I felt like they just they did a prequel is what they did. And without doing what, people didn't know what the prequel to what. And I think that's where they lost that. So I didn't feel so bad. I mean, I was disappointed. I can't say I wasn't. But also on my mind, I know that everything at some point has to come to an end. Clayton, in his mind, it would never came to an end. He was the Lone Ranger at the end. And if he could put the costume on at the age he was when he passed, he would have done it. Me, like John Hart told me, at some point it's got to come to an end. At some point you have to move on to other things. And that's okay. You can still believe in the character. You can still believe, but do the best you can for the time you have it. And when you don't have it anymore, you can say you did the best you could the time you had it. So in my eyes, you know what? I did the best I could the time I had it. And now that it's gone, it's time to move on. And Peter Breck told me that. Peter Breck had taught me that. He was, again, like a second father. Him and I spent so much time. He stayed at my house in Las Vegas. When he came into town to do his appearances, and we talked so much about that. He said, you know what, when Big Valley ended, Scott, after 5 seasons, I did the best I could with what I had, and I moved on, and I still embraced the time that I did, and people remember me for that. I played Nick Barkley. Now, I'm no longer Nick Barkley, and that's okay. And when he told me that, I was like, you know what, he's right. And then, so for me, it wasn't that much of a disappointment. It was just a chapter in the book, and now it's time for a new chapter. That's all.
You said they gave you a cease and desist notice to block you from wearing the mask. So just curious, when exactly did your run as the Lone Ranger end?
June of 2002. So I went from June of, I think it was 99, or it was just the end of 99 until 2002. So a little bit more than 2 years. I was probably 2 years and change doing the Lone Ranger. And then June of 2002, I got that cease and desist. And again, that was my last time that I wore that mask, was that time. So, and overall, I was, though I was disappointed, I was good with it. I felt good that I had done my tour of duty, and I did what I could to help the character, and now it's someone else's turn. I looked on my time as favorable and had a lot of good feedback from it, and now it's someone else's turn to try and get that, and keep it going. Christopher Reeves couldn't do Superman forever, and Michael Keaton didn't do Batman forever, or Adam West, or any of these people who played characters over the years, and even your people now who play these roles of Superman and Batman, they're not going to be able to do it forever. And at some point, they got to hand the torch off, and someone else has to embody that. So people, Antonio Banderas with Zorro, at some point, you're going to make a new Zorro, and it won't be Antonio Banderas. Just like Guy Williams when he did Zorro. At some point, they had to get another person to do it. So, and that's kind of how I felt the Lone Ranger. I can't have it forever. Be happy for the time I had it.
How different do you think your life would look right now had you played the Lone Ranger in a movie?
Well, obviously it would have been ecstatic, and maybe would have spawned off 2 or 3 more movies. I think it would have got me into some other projects, or obviously, it's endless what the possibilities could have been. But I'll look back on that as being, what could have been, should have been. I've had a great run of doing things. Again, new chapters and stuff like that. But I don't look at that as a so much as a missed opportunity. I just look at it as grateful that I had the time that I had it, and for me, it would have been awesome, no doubt. But I think it was awesome the time I had it. I really do. I feel like I did a movie. Having spent all that time, all those appearances year after year, it's more work than doing a movie. So, in a way, I played that character longer than Chad Michael Murray or anybody else who's done the Lone Ranger. I did it more than Clinton Spilsbury when he did it. So for me, I felt like I did a movie. It was a 2.5-year movie.
Now that you mention that, you're absolutely right. You have played the role longer than John Hart, Jack DeMauve, Clinton Spilsbury, Chad Michael Murray, and Armie Hammer. Besides Clayton Moore, you have had the longest run as the Lone Ranger. Now, of course, there was Brace Beamer and the guys on the radio who played the role longer than you, but post Clayton Moore, you have done it the longest.
Yeah, and John Hart had mentioned that. He said, heck, yeah, he did it for a year, and he did some appearances, and stuff like that. It was tough, though. They had to make his mask bigger because people were upset there wasn't Clayton Moore, and they wanted to make the Lone Ranger look the same. That's where the problem was with that. That's why they brought back Clayton Moore. But John Hart said, hey, you did it longer. You did a lot longer than I would have done it because it was just grueling. But he applauded me for it. And I do look at it. Yeah, it was a long run, and I appreciated it. And for me, for other people who did it for a short run, it was nice not to be that one and done. It was more, again, even though it wasn't a major movie, I got to do a lot of other little things that added up to be more than a movie. So I certainly have no regrets. It was definitely a blast.
Have you always felt that way, or did it take you some time to get over not being able to make a Lone Ranger movie?
It took a little time, to be honest. I mean, you get the first cease and desist, or you see this movie come out on the WB, you kind of, at first, it took me a little bit. I was younger then than I am now, obviously, but I was still an adult, but I still, you still feel a little upset, but I got over it pretty quick, more than I thought I would get over it. I mean, it was kind of like, I compartmentalized it. I just said, this is my time. I had my time. And I think I had a great support group of other actors who've done TV series where their time had ended. I think that helped me a lot. Like I said, mentioning Peter Breck, and having a very close relationship with him and other actors that I knew for a lot of Western TV shows. I felt like I belonged to that group now because they're all done with their series, and their series ended before they wanted it. And so for me to hang out with them, and I still did in Hollywood, we'd have breakfast on Sundays at Sportsman's Lodge and Studio City. We talk about it. It was almost like great, let's share our times, and we've moved on from it, and this is how we dealt with it. And I think having that support group really got me along pretty good. It was almost transparent in a way. It was pretty quick.
What would have been your take on the character had you got to play the Lone Ranger in a movie? Could you give us an example or two of what we would have seen had this movie got made?
Well, pretty much what I did in my appearances. That firmness, my handshakes were firm, my stature was firm, yet I did have more of a tongue-in-cheek side to me that Clayton Moore didn't have. I joked around a little bit more, made the character a little bit more friendly in a way where it wasn't just so serious. And I think that's what I got compliments for, is that, Clayton did a great job with his. And talking to John Hart, he didn't like the seriousness. It was just there wasn't enough playfulness or some wisecracks here and there. And that's what Batman did so well with, especially with Michael Keaton back then, which started off as more of a, less straightforward, let's go for a little bit of, humor here and there. And I think that's what I tried to do with the character. So I would have done that a little bit more, show that. And Mickey Free felt the same way with Tano. Let's have a little bit of fun with this. Let's not be so forward and serious. We'll get serious when the time needs to be. But let's have a little fun. Let's make some mistakes. We're human beings, and a superhero can't always be perfect, but we always want them to be. Let's show a little bit of vulnerability. I think that's what we were trying to go with. That we could be vulnerable. We didn't have any superpowers. We just had our wits about us. We had basically a will to survive, and that's what we wanted to get across. That we were just two normal men that had some skills as horsemen, as gun handlers, as people who survived in the West and dealing with the elements. That's kind of how we want to take the approach. We had no superpowers. Our superpower was our intellect and our physical ability and our ability to think quick and get out of a situation.
Obviously, making a movie was something that you would have liked to have done as the Lone Ranger, but that has more to do with Scott Shepherd, the actor, than it does the character of the Lone Ranger. So, as the character of the Lone Ranger, what's something that you didn't get a chance to do that you would have liked to have done?
Boy, that's a tough one. Trying to think as the character I'd like to have done. I mean, again, it was if I had done a movie, I could tell you what I'd like to have done in the movie. But having not done the movie, I'm just basing it off of a few commercials and some of the appearances I did. I wish I did more on horseback. We were limited in venues. A lot of venues that we did on horseback had to accommodate, more of the indoor stuff, and so it was hard to get a horse to do. It was not the problem with I see a lot of Lone Rangers. I wish that the series did more. Is I wanted Silver was a character. Silver and Scout were characters along with Tonto and the Lone Ranger. And I'm a big horse guy, so for me, I wanted to highlight more of the ability of the horses too, because if you look at it, it's a team effort. The Batmobile was a car that Batman used, and then you had all these other Bat plane, the Bat bike, the Bat boat. So they highlighted that, and the Batmobile was a character itself. And to me, the horse has a brain, and it's a physical animal, and it's a majestic animal. And I felt like we should have infused a little bit more in our appearances with the horse, because they were characters themselves, and they had their own intellect, their own abilities. And without them, the Tonto and the Lone Ranger couldn't do their job. I mean, they couldn't get around, number one, but they couldn't do their job. And I think with Zorro, they made the horse a character. Tornado was a character, and that horse had abilities, and that's what makes that character work so well. Because Zorro had no partner; his partner was his horse. And with the Lone Ranger and Tonto, our partners were Scout and Silver. And I think had we done a movie and with the personal appearances, I think we should have infused those horses more, so people then could get into the characters of the horses, and we're also showing the equine, the majestic animal, and help put forth the preservation of this animal, and get more people into wanting to care for horses, ride horses, get into the equine world, and so that would have been my wish of what I had done more.
The Lone Ranger is known as the master of disguises, so had you gotten the opportunity to play the Lone Ranger in disguise, how much fun would that have been?
Well, it would have been fun. I mean, I think when you look at Clayton Moore playing the miner or an old man, whatever it may be, that would have been a cool part of it, because you're not always in costume now. You're in different costumes. So, it would have been fun to come up with different costume ideas to change in and out of, but not lose what the Lone Ranger's true costume was. So you couldn't do it too much. You had to find that balance. Otherwise, you lose that connection of the outfit. Because people identify with that character, see what the other characters do when you have Superman and Batman and Zorro, is their alter ego was you could see them without their masks on. The Lone Ranger's mystique was you never saw him without his mask off. So you had to balance that now with these other costumes to break up the fact that he's always in this Lone Ranger costume. Where the other characters, such as Batman and Superman, all that, you saw them in their alter egos without their costume on, so really that was their other disguise. So for the Lone Ranger to be in the other disguises, that was his alter ego.
What was the most difficult part about playing the Lone Ranger?
Putting that costume on and off, walking around in it. That was the most difficult part. It was very time consuming, because it had to look perfect every time you went out, and you had to constantly get, as the day wears on, you get a little disheveled. You're constantly fixing yourself and getting back to that perfect look, and you couldn't sweat. If you sweat, you had to change your shirt. Everything, you're wearing those black leather gloves all the time. That gun belt with two guns, and there was a real Colt 45s. So there was a lot of weight on you, and walking around in the boots, and and sometimes you're on gunite floor, which is the hardest concrete substance you can walk on. A lot of the convention centers I went to, there was gunite, so it was very difficult on your legs. So it really was punishing over time. because you spent hours upon hours standing on your feet. You weren't sitting down. The Lone Ranger doesn't sit down unless he's on a horse. So you're always standing and walking and talking. And, it's a lot of work that way.
What was the easiest part?
I think the easiest part was talking to people, reminiscing, talking about the TV show. That was the fun part. I laughed a lot. I mean, I didn't have that stoic look. It was the easiest part was talking to people, because people are great to talk to. I mean, especially when they have a mutual love for a character. That was the easiest part. Never had a problem talking to the public. I love being in the public. I love talking to the kids. I love passing along, the knowledge of the Lone Ranger. And I learned a lot from people about the Lone Ranger, things I didn't know. I mean, I can only do so much homework, but I've met people over time that had some sort of connection to the Lone Ranger, whether it been the radio shows, whether it been the books, or whether it been movies. To me, that was the easy part. It was just talking to people. It really made my time easier doing a character when people were just so into it and so open.
I'm a true Lone Ranger fanboy. If Michael Uslan is the boy who loved Batman, then Michael Radich is the stranger who loves the Lone Ranger. I love everything. The TV show, the movies, the movie serials, the radio show, the comic books, the novels, The Legend of the Lone Ranger with Clinton Spilsbury, The Lone Ranger with Chad Michael Murray. I love it all, except for the 2013 Lone Ranger movie with Johnny Depp and Armie Hammer. I can't stand that movie. I think it's terrible. Did you see that movie? And if so, what were your thoughts?
I saw the movie. I mean, I like Johnny Depp as an actor. Of course, everybody knows him as Captain Jack Sparrow. That's his most famous character. He's done other great movies, from Donnie Brasco to you name it. I mean, he's 21 Jump Street TV series. Johnny Depp is a great actor. He's done a great job with everything he does. I think with Tonto, he just made it too Captain Jack. I saw Captain Jack Sparrow dressed as a Native American. I think that's where that got lost. I'm not sure how that character was developed, whether it would be by him or the studio. And then Armie Hammer, I just don't think he believed in the part. I think he saw it as an acting role, chance to get his name out there. He thought it would be a marquee movie made by Jerry Bruckheimer, and big budget, and maybe it'll get the same traction as the Pirates of the Caribbean because Johnny Depp's in it. They put Armie Hammer through cowboy camp for a few weeks to get him into being a cowboy, and they do that sometimes with actors instead of getting someone who has that background like Mickey and I did. And then Armie Hammer character, I think what they try to do is they try to do a little too much PC. The political correctness of the guns, and they had Armie Hammer wear a long coat to cover his guns a lot of times, and it made him look a little bit too affable, where he was, too inept at his skills. The horse was too cartoonish. They did with Silver. I think they just didn't know what direction they went in. I think they tried to make the Pirates of the Caribbean of the Old West. I think that's what hurt it. They didn't try to make it its own. And, I don't know Armie Hammer personally. I don't know Johnny Depp personally. So I'm not sure what their involvements were in developing the characters. But I just think that, again, they took something and threw it against the wall to see if it would stick, and it fell to the ground. But it was almost like he was not a hero. When they had Antonio Banderas play Zorro, there was a certain vulnerability about him in the beginning, and then when Anthony Hopkins' version of Zorro trains Zorro, Antonio Banderas' character now becomes his own. Now he becomes the expert at what he's doing, and by the end of the movie, his Zorro character was now, that's it. He didn't need help. After the first half hour of the movie of Zorro, Antonio Banderas' character, he was now no longer inept. He was now mastered at a lot of skills, but he was still learning. And I think that's what people liked about that movie, is that the new Zorro, taking over from Anthony Hopkins' Zorro, he was now a skilled person, still learning, but he was no longer a person who needed great help. But Armie Hammer's character, he needed help throughout the whole movie. At no point was he developing any skills. No point was he grasping what he was doing as a Lone Ranger, and I think that's what, I'm not sure why they went that direction, but it really didn't generate with the audience. That's where they lost that connection. The audience couldn't connect with that. And then the whole Silver on a Train, just, again, too cartoonish. They really didn't show the skills of a horse. They really didn't highlight with the horse. They made it more of a CGI thing than it really was anything about, the bond between Silver and the Lone Ranger. It just really didn't connect. I think that's what people lost with that. You're right. There was no development. It was just magically overnight. There he was. There was no training. Like Anthony Hopkins, I refer back to that. They showed Antonio Banderas training with Anthony Hopkins in the cave, learning how to become Zorro and handing off that torch and not just train him in skill set, but also train him in his intellect and his mindset. And I think that's what people in the audience generated with. They were like, wow, that's how someone becomes a hero. They're learning and they're studying.
Now, I think all the listeners are tired of hearing me bash this movie, so I'm just going to say that I'm not a fan of this movie and leave it at that. I didn't like Johnny Depp as Tonto, and I didn't like Armie Hammer as the Lone Ranger. I've gone into detail a million times about why I don't like this movie, so I'm just going to leave it at that. I'll let you say what you didn't like about the movie, but for me, I'm just going to say that I don't like this movie because people get sick and tired when I carry on about how bad this movie is and how much I hate it. So I'm going to do everyone a favor and just not say anything except I don't like this movie, and that's all.
It is rough. I mean, it's, again, they spent $200 million to make that movie, which is $150 million more than they need to make it for. They put all that money into the actors and the CGI, and they did poor marketing at it. No appearances by any actors. Really no connection. And again, they just lived off the name of Johnny Depp and Jerry Bruckheimer, the whole Pirates of the Caribbean deal, and it didn't resonate, and that's what they ended up with. And much like, everybody says that George Clooney killed the Batman franchise with his installment of Batman. Kind of like what they did with the Lone Ranger here. They did pretty much kill the franchise, if there even was a franchise anymore. Now you have to hope for someone to reboot it again in 5, 6, 10 years and try to hand at it again, and see what happens. And that's about next time you'll see a Lone Ranger movie. My estimate is you'll probably see one in 2023, if that, unfortunately. So, it has not, it's the curse of the Lone Ranger. Maybe Clayton Moore put the curse on, ever since he last did it, from Clinton Stillsbury on, it has not, it's just been problem after problem. It's sad to see, have a character die off like that really embodies what the cowboy code and the morals and integrity of somebody who's on the side of fighting against evil and all the other things that go along with it. So it's okay. I mean, this is again a lot of learning curves, a lot of growing pains, and hopefully someone one day like yourself, maybe you'll be the one that will produce a Lone Ranger movie.
I have a treatment. I have this Lone Ranger story that I wrote a few years ago, and right now I'm in the process of trying to get it made. I've been talking with the current trademark owners of the Lone Ranger character, and they like my ideas. We've been going back and forth. We've had several conversations. So that's what I'm working on right now. And I think the story that I've come up with is the perfect Lone Ranger story. It has everything that you can possibly want in a Lone Ranger story. We have clean-cut, patriotic heroes audiences can cheer for. We have a beautiful leading lady. We have a great brains-heavy, a crook posing as a respectable citizen. We have a great action-heavy, the henchman of the main villain who does all his dirty work. We have a young boy who the younger fans can relate to. We have all the Western tropes that we've all come to know and love. We have all that mixed into it and put into one story. So I think when all the Lone Ranger fans see what we've come up with, they're really going to love it, because I think it's the best Lone Ranger story that's ever been told, and we just need a few things to fall into place to be able to put it out to the public and make it a reality. Right now, the project I'm working on is a 12-chapter comic book series called Cage Fighters from the Rock. I need to make that a success. I need to make that very popular, use that as leverage to get my hands on the Lone Ranger. That's what needs to fall in line for me right now in order to make this Lone Ranger project a reality. I need to make that very successful. That's why I'm pushing Cage Fighters from the Rock, my new comic book series, so hard, is because if I'm able to make that a success, then I'll be able to get my hands on the Lone Ranger. So if you want to see the Lone Ranger get made, if you want to see my version of the Lone Ranger, if you want to see me put my money where my mouth is, go to patreon.com/Mike Radich right now and pre-order Cage Fighters from the Rock. If we make that popular, make that something big, I'll be able to use that as leverage to get my hands on the Lone Ranger. But I do have a Lone Ranger treatment. I have a Lone Ranger story, and I know every fan of the Lone Ranger will love it.
It takes a person like yourself with that thinking that you never say never. I mean, you're young enough. You have that enthusiasm. You have that drive. You have that understanding of the character. You know, in the time I've talked to you, whatever it's worth, you have my blessing for sure. You know, have at it, and I'll be the first one to stand in line for a ticket.
I just got the blessing from the Lone Ranger. Like, if this isn't a sign that I'm going to resurrect him, I don't know what is. But I think I've done a very good job of mixing in modern day to attract a modern day audience with honoring the stuff from the past. Because, again, once we're able to put it out into the public, you know, hopefully sooner rather than later, I think we're just going to kill it. I really do think that I've come up with the secret formula that's been missing for 50 plus years. I think I have the story.
Well, good. I mean, you've had the chance to use a lot of examples and a lot of, again, other people's growing pains, gather your homework. I mean, you obviously understand the history. I think you have the best shot at this point because you really have a passion for it, and it takes somebody with a passion. It really does. It takes somebody with that passion like Frank Stryker did many moons ago, where you have that passion for the character, and that's what it takes to put it on screen. So I think, if anything, you have the best shot right now. And, you know, I hope you keep at it because I'd love to see a new, true rendition of the Lone Ranger that I can be proud of and sit through time and time again.
Well, it means a lot coming from you, and to have your blessing, a guy who played the Lone Ranger and was mentored by Chuck Courtney, the guy who played Dan Reed. Like,
that's right.
This is just great here. We've got a lot of lineage going. You know, it's Chuck Courtney, it's you, it's me. Like, this is great. I'm on cloud nine right now. What can I say?
Well, I'm glad. It's you know, I love talking to people like yourself who have that real appreciation for the character, who understand them. I think, if anything, I feel better today. You've made my day knowing that there's somebody out there that has this drive and passion to keep something going that I believed in truly. And I still believe in. I mean, I still reflect back. People still come over my house and want to see pictures, and I have them up on the wall with the Lone Ranger. You know, and they talk about my stories every now and then. And I know some Hollywood people still talk to me about the good old days when I did it, and it's fun. You know, I'm glad that there's somebody like yourself out there who can now take this and run with it. And all I can say is run. Make it happen, man. You're the one who can do it. So, you know, and even if you don't, just this conversation shows that you gave it a good try, and that you really, you know, so let's keep that lineage going. Let's keep that chain going.
I don't mean to sound weird or corny, but it's my destiny to resurrect the Lone Ranger. It's only fitting that I'm the one who resurrects this character, someone who grew up loving the Lone Ranger. He's my favorite character, all-time favorite character, always loved him, and I'm from 30 minutes away from where this all started. I live 30 minutes outside of Detroit, where he originated on WXYZ radio in Detroit. That's where this whole thing started, and my grandparents are buried in the same cemetery where Brace Beamer is buried, and when I first talked to the current trademark owners of the Lone Ranger character, our first conversation was earlier this year. It was back in January of 2018, and it was January 30th, 2018. And it was at 6:30 Eastern Time, which means it's almost 85 years to the exact second that the Lone Ranger debuted. When they first talked to me, the first conversation I ever had with the current trademark owners, it was January 30th, 2018 at 6:30. And the Lone Ranger debuted on radio January 30th, 1933 at 7:30. So it was almost the exact time, 85 years in the future, that I had this conversation, and it started to get the ball rolling with me attempting to resurrect the Lone Ranger. You can't write this kind of stuff. A guy from the area, always loved the character. You can't write this stuff. I'm definitely the guy who's going to resurrect this character. There's no question about it. I have the story. Like, I love Batman, and I love Superman, and I love Spider-Man, and I love Zorro, and I love all these characters. They're all great characters. I'm a huge fan of all these characters, but the best Batman story, the best Spider-Man story, the best Zorro story, they've already been told. But the best Lone Ranger story hasn't been told yet, because I have the best Lone Ranger story ever. It's in my filing cabinet. I'm going to be the one to tell the greatest Lone Ranger story, because when fans see this story, everyone's going to love it. Everything happens for a reason, and there's a reason why everyone before me has failed to resurrect the character. The reason is, it's my destiny to be the one to resurrect the character. I'm supposed to be the one to resurrect the character and make him number one again. That's the reason. And I will resurrect this character. He's fallen on hard times as of late, but I do have the story to make this character number one again. I can guarantee you that.
Well, that's good, and I'm glad you have that. I think, hey, you have my number now. If you need any help on your research, let me know. You know, you have a fan here. Now I'm your fan,
yeah.
So you have a fan here in me that'll help you and talk you up and support you, and it's just like those who have done for me. So just keep doing what you're doing, and it may happen sooner than later. And again, I'll be proud to see that happen, and just the conversation talking to you, no better person right now to carry that torch than yourself.
Thanks, Scott. I really appreciate that. That means the world coming from you. I've been a fan of the little that I've seen of you. I've been a fan of you for a very long time. I've been really wanting to talk with you forever. Like, I just think that, I'm really happy to talk with you, but I'm also kind of depressed because I wish we would have seen your version of the Lone Ranger, but I guess it's not a perfect world. It wasn't meant to be, but I have been a fan of you for a very long time, and Mickey Free, I love that guy. I'm a huge fan of him also, and I think you guys just would have knocked it out of the park. So this has been a real honor and a privilege to speak with you today. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, thank you. I've had a lot of fun too, and again, keep the great work and keep at it, and any help you need from me, let me know. Be more than happy to help you out, and for everything that I've done, I've enjoyed my time at it, and again, I still have my connection to it in some way as I go along, and I'm involved with horses to this day, and everything that I do is centered around some type of Western lifestyle or environment. So what I did then is what I do now. I stay in that Western character as a person, and at that time when I did Lone Ranger, it was just another part of that Western lifestyle character that I had. So as long as you have a passion for it and you believe in it, eventually it'll come around. And for you, I think that'll happen. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Scott, real quick before I let you go, since this is the 85th anniversary of the Lone Ranger, the fans, they want to hear from you. They want to hear from the Lone Ranger. Do you have a message for the Lone Ranger fans?
I do. Number one, I appreciate all the support that people have for the character. I speak on behalf of everybody who's played the Lone Ranger. The character couldn't survive this many years, 85 years without you. All the generations worth. Again, on behalf of everybody who's been involved with the Lone Ranger, whether you're behind the scenes, on camera, or whatever it may be, on the radio, those who have now passed on, who look down from above, I think we all appreciate all the fans out there that keep this character strong. And believe in the Lone Ranger and all of you who supported him. And Tonto, I think you all embody Tonto and the Lone Ranger as well. I think everybody has a little bit of Tonto and a little bit of Lone Ranger in them. And, just keep it going.
Scott, there's one more thing we need from you, and I think you know what that is. I think it's only fitting that we end the interview with this, so take it away, my friend.
Here we go. I got to get myself going for this one. Okay, Michael, you ready?
I'm ready.
I